Cross-sectional analyses are conducted by variables that have been collected at one point in time. Hi, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, epidemiologist, biostatistician, faculty member, and in this video I will be going over some application, some real-life, peer-reviewed scholarly journal application of cross-sectional studies. So before we do anything, let's get one thing clear. What is the difference between a cross-sectional study and a longitudinal study? Well, the simplest way to illustrate this is by creating kind of a timeline here. And if we then look at this as current and this as the past, and a cross-sectional study, regardless of whatever the question is, it's being collected one point in time, typically sometime in the current. Now, with a longitudinal, it's a little bit more complicated because you're starting off with some predictor X, and then Y is actually sometime in the future. So instead of X and Y being here in a cross-sectional, this is cross-sectional. Instead, you have this going on in some future point in time, which is Y, which is longitudinal. So this is the basic difference, and I'm going to go over both types of studies in the next segment of this video. So now this study is a cross-sectional study. The previous study I went over was a longitudinal study. This is a cross-sectional study, still looking at the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, but looking at different types of variables. So let's take a look at this. So the main two variables, and notice in each of these cases, there's actually a third variable, which I'm not going over for the sake of simplicity. But there's actually a modifying variable that in this situation I'm actually going to go over quickly. So the main two variables, remember, we always start off with this figure here. So remember, if this is the present time, so the trick here is to see when these were collected. So they were collected at the same point in time. If BPA was collected at one point and then the data for obesity was another time, then this would be something like a prospective cohort study or something of that nature, some sort of longitudinal study. But because they're in the same time, then you have a cross-sectional study. And so the measure of association that's used here is, in fact, the odds ratio, as you can see. BPA and obesity, and the years that the data was collected is between 2003 to 2010 National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. And so there was, in fact, a relationship. So endocrine disruptors are, in fact, harmful to the body. And specifically when we're looking for modifiers, remember I said I was going to actually go over this. Race is actually modifying this relationship. So some, as it turns out, some ethnic groups actually feel endocrine disruptors more strongly than others. And this may be not due to any inherent factors, but due to social factors that affect specific ethnic groups differently, historically marginalized populations differently. So that is the study design, epidemiological study design that is in this article. Now I'm going to go. So many times it's difficult to know what the study is trying to communicate, or what the authors are trying to communicate through the study, in a brief sort of abstract. And most of what I have presented are actually designed for you to be looking at, if you're first starting to look at epidemiology, because they've been written in brief abstract formats, with easy to interpret figures. But this is designed in a way to have conversations. Once you do have epidemiological findings, this is a quick way to make sure that this is transcribed and described. So you can read this or go through the podcast. And this is a good idea to make communication